Hello dear viewers, welcome back once again to this educational channel called Learn Bio with Janet for Form 4 and Form 5 biology students sitting for the SPM exams and also for other high school students who may find the content and the memory tips here relevant to their syllabus. My name is Janet and I'm an experienced biology teacher who has helped many students to excel in this fascinating subject which I'm passionate about. These teaching videos will help students gain a better understanding of biology, improve their memory of biology facts, and build their critical thinking skills. Today, we'll be studying Biology for Form 5, Chapter 3, Subtopic 3.1, Part 1, entitled Coordination and Response. There will be a HOTS essay question at the end of this video, so do try it before viewing the second video on this subtopic, which is Part 2. In the second video, model answers will be given for the HOTS question, and a super memory tip for this subtopic will be given to help students perform better in exams should this topic be asked. Please remember to share, like, comment and subscribe. Let's begin. The learning outcomes for this lesson are as follows. We must be able to list changes in the external and internal environments, that is stimuli, faced by an organism. So the word changes in the external and internal environments actually mean the stimuli. So be able to list the stimuli faced by an organism. B, be able to explain the meaning of the terms stimulus, response, and also receptors and effectors by giving examples. And C, be able to state the main components of a coordinating system in the correct order. Here's an overview of what we are going to study today. The topic is Coordination and Response, subtopic 3.1, also titled Response and Coordination. And the terms we are going to study are stimulus or stimuli. The plural form is stimuli. So stimuli are divided into internal stimuli and external stimuli. Receptor, effector, response, and the meaning of coordination. So we have to be able to define these terms and give examples for them. For B, components of a coordinating system, we are going to study the various components in the correct order. Stimulus received by a receptor, and impulse is produced that travels through the efferent neuron to the integrating center. So integrating center is the control center where all the impulses will go to and where new impulses will be generated for the responses. So the integrating center can be the brain or spinal cord, and then impulse is produced that travels through the efferent neuron to the effector, which carries out the response. Thirdly, for examples of pathway of response to external and internal stimuli, this part will be discussed in the second video, and it will be the basis for the essay question and answer. The first term that we are going to study is the term stimulus. The plural form is stimuli. Stimuli. According to the British pronunciation, it is stimuli, not stimuli. So a stimulus is a change in the external or internal environment detected by an organism. So this change can occur in the external environment, meaning in the environment outside our bodies, for example, in the home or in the classroom or in the field or in a shopping mall. And these changes are detected by the organism or the human being. Okay? So changes in the external environment are called external stimuli or external stimulus. So a change outside the body in the external environment. whereas changes that occur in the internal environment are called internal stimulus. Now, what are the changes in the internal environment? So first, the word internal environment means the blood or interstitial fluid, all right, that surrounds the cells. So your internal environment is the environment that surrounds your cells inside the body. That's why it's called internal environment. Okay, the environment around the cells. This includes the interstitial fluid that bathes the cells, the fluid that surrounds the cells and bathes the cells, and also the blood in which the red blood cells and white blood cells are found. All right. So any change in the interstitial fluid and the blood, that is the internal environment, is called an internal stimulus. For example, the body temperature and the temperature of the internal environment may change. Okay, if the weather gets hotter, so you feel very hot. So let's look at some of the changes as we go along. Now, for the external stimulus, which occurs in the external environment, the changes in the external environment, examples are sound, light, pain, smell, taste, heat, and cold. So wherever you are, you're always detecting changes in the external environment. The changes are always occurring. Okay, maybe suddenly you will hear the sound of someone talking, or the sound of the TV that's switched on, or you may smell some of the cooking that is carried out in the kitchen by your mother. Okay, the smell may go into your room, and so forth. So our body is forever detecting different stimuli around us. Okay, the changes that are occurring in the external environment. So all these are the different stimuli, right? The external environment. Now for internal environment, what are the internal stimulus? Changes in blood pressure, body temperature, blood osmotic pressure, blood glucose level, and blood pH. These are all stimuli, okay, to our body cells. The changes, not just the blood pressure, it must be the changes. Okay, so be able to give examples of the different stimuli, external stimuli and internal stimuli. Let us discuss some stimuli that we may experience or detect in our everyday lives. For example, in the first picture, you see the durian here and a person. And from this picture, what is the stimulus that the person is experiencing or detecting? Yes, it's smell. Okay, the overpowering smell of the durian has wafted into the nose of this person, and it stimulates the receptors in the nose. Okay, so the nose receptors are stimulated by the chemicals that come out from the durian. To some, the smell is fragrant, and to others, it may be repulsive or not nice to smell. Now, let's go on to the second situation. In this picture, what is the stimulus? Yes, it is light from the light bulb. So the light is a stimulus that stimulated the photoreceptors, which is a type of receptor that is sensitive to light. And it's found, these receptors are found in the retina of the eye, at the back of the back region of the eye. Okay, the photoreceptors are light sensitive receptors. Photo means light. So light sensitive receptors that can detect the stimulus of light and produce the nerve impulses which are transmitted to the brain, okay, to interpret what the person sees. For the third situation, a person has touched a hot saucepan. So what is the stimulus here? Yes, it is heat. So heat has stimulated the receptors in the skin of the hand. All right, and the skin detected the stimulus and thus produced the impulse, which is transmitted again to the nervous system, central nervous system. Okay. The second term that we are discussing now is receptor. A receptor is a specialized cell that can detect a stimulus and start the transmission of nerve impulses. So receptors are found in the sensory organs or the sense organs like the ear, nose, eyes, and also the tongue in the mouth, the tongue and the skin to detect external stimuli. For example, the ear will detect the stimulus of sound, the nose will detect the stimulus of smell, and the eyes will detect the stimulus of light. Okay? And two more sense organs that are not mentioned here are, in this first line, are the tongue that's in the mouth and the skin. Okay, here we have the skin. The receptors in the skin detect external stimuli for temperature, the heat and the cold, and pain, and also for pressure. Okay, so the skin has various receptors, not just one. Then inside our body, we have the baroreceptors in the arteries to detect internal stimulus of changes in blood pressure. So the word baro here means pressure, and we have studied in chapter 1, we have studied the role of baroreceptors to help regulate the blood pressure. Okay, so when there's a change in blood pressure, baroreceptors in the carotid artery and the aorta will be able to detect the change in the blood pressure, whether there's an increase or decrease in blood pressure. Okay, so once the receptor has detected the stimulus, it will produce an impulse. The stimulus will trigger the production of impulse by the receptor, which is then transmitted by nerves to the brain. Okay, so here, just to recap, the sensory organs, the ear, nose, eyes, tongue, and the skin detect external stimuli in the external environment. And certain receptors detect internal stimuli, such as baroreceptors inside the body. It will help to detect the change in blood pressure. In this overview, we see different sense organs or sensory organs that contain different types of receptors to detect different stimuli. For example, the eyes. The eyes contain a type of receptor, specialized receptor called photoreceptor. The receptors that are sensitive to light are called photoreceptors to detect stimulus of light. For example, if you are looking at the blackboard or whiteboard and you are reading the words, the light from those words are entering your eyes and stimulating your photoreceptors. Okay, so the stimulus is light, not the words, but the light that comes from those words. Okay, like the black color words or the blue color words. So eyes have the photoreceptors to detect the stimulus of light from the environment, and it helps us to read things. Okay, now nose. The nose contains a type of receptor, specialized cell called chemoreceptors, that are sensitive to the chemicals in the air, so they can detect the stimulus of smell, like just now the smell of durians, or the smell of perfume, or the smell of soap. We detect them by using the chemoreceptors that are sensitive to the different stimuli of smell. Ears are able to detect the stimulus of sound and balance. So we do not need to know the names of the receptors, all the receptors, all right? So I just give you a few names, specific names. But for ears, we just say that it has the receptor, the sound receptor, to detect the stimulus of sound. Okay, and it also has receptors to detect the balance of the body. Then we come to the tongue. The tongue has also got different chemoreceptors to detect the stimulus of taste. As we eat the food, they contain different types of chemicals that will stimulate the taste buds. So the taste buds contain these chemoreceptors too, but different type, to detect the different chemicals in food, and that causes us to be able to taste the food, whether it is sweet or sour or bitter and so forth. The skin has many different types of receptors that can detect different stimuli such as heat, cold, touch and pressure. So you have heat receptors, cold receptors, touch receptors, and pressure receptors. Thirdly, let's look at this word, effector. Let's say this word, effector. It's the part of the body that produces a response to a stimulus. Okay, that means the part of the body that will respond to a stimulus. If you touch a hot object, then your hand will be pulled back. Okay, so the part of the body that responds is your hand, the muscles in your hand. Okay, it responds to the stimulus of heat. Now, let's look at the two examples of effectors. They're either muscles or glands. For muscles, there are three types of muscles that can all be effectors. Skeletal muscles attached to the bones of our body. Smooth muscles are found in the hollow organs, the wall of the hollow organs, okay, such as the stomach and the intestines. Okay, they can also respond. For example, intestines can carry out peristalsis, the contraction of the smooth muscles and the relaxation of the smooth muscles. That is a type of response, okay, to food entering the intestines. Cardiac muscles are found in the heart, so your heartbeat rate can go up and down according to the activities that you carry out. That is a response. Now, glands. Glands are tissues that secrete a fluid, okay, for a purpose. So sweat gland will act when you are feeling hot. You will secrete sweat. So it is an effector. Okay? And when you secrete sweat, it will help to cool down the body. So that is the response, the secretion of sweat and the cooling down the body. Salivary gland secretes saliva as a response to seeing the food, delicious food on the table. Our salivary gland will produce the saliva. Thyroid gland and adrenal glands will be discussed also later, right? So we do not need to know the function here, but they're all effectors. So here we see two types of effectors, the muscles and the glands. For example, biceps muscle can contract or relax as a response to a stimulus. Glands like sweat glands can secrete sweat when the person is hot. Okay, so these two are effectors. The fourth term that we need to know is response. A response is a reaction to a stimulus that is carried out by an effector. Okay, so for example, when a student is asked a question by a teacher in the class, the student can raise his or her hand to answer the question in class. So in this case, the student has reacted to the stimulus, which is the sound of the teacher's voice, and he decides whether to carry out the response to raise his hand or not. So when he raises his hand, it's the effector, that is the muscle of the hand, that cause his hand to be raised, okay, when the muscle contracts. So the effector here is a muscle. For example, it could be the triceps muscle, okay, that straightens the hand upwards. So this is a type of voluntary action. This response is a type of voluntary action, meaning the student can control whether he wants to raise his hand or not. So it's controlled by the conscious will or conscious mind and will. Okay. Now the second example is an involuntary action that is not controlled by the conscious mind or will. Okay, it's done automatically as a fast reflex action. For example, the biceps muscle contracts and the hand withdraws after a person touches a hot object. As seen in this picture, if a person were to touch a hot saucepan, the stimulus is the heat from the saucepan. So you will react to the heat by withdrawing his hand. Okay, this is an involuntary action in that the person cannot control it with his conscious thought. Before he can even think, he has withdrawn his hand. Okay, I will study this type of reaction or reflex action later on. Okay, but the response is carried out by muscle also. Biceps muscle contracts so that the hand withdraws from the hot object. Okay, so some responses like this are to protect us from harmful things like heat or sharp objects. Now the third example is about earthworms. Earthworms move away from light and crawl to a darker place. So earthworms do not like the light because it will dry up their bodies. So when they are exposed to the light, their response is to move away from the light. Again, the reaction is carried out by effectors, which are the muscles in the bodies, okay, which contract to help them move away from the light. And the light is the stimulus, so they are reacting to the light. Okay, so the response is to move away from the light. Let's look at this learning outcome or question. Explain with examples the meaning of coordination. Coordination, or penyelarasan in Malay, is the ability of an organism to first detect the different stimuli. Usually an environment will have more than one stimulus, which is detected by the different sense organs. Okay, the smell, the sight, the sound of things, and so forth. And this is detected by the receptors, and then integrate all the different sensory information. Now this is done by the brain. To integrate means to combine together, to see it as a whole, okay? To be aware of the surroundings as a whole, and to respond to the stimuli. Now this is the job of the effectors. All right. So when the person responds to the stimuli, usually he has to use different body parts smoothly and efficiently, coordinate them. So this is the job of the nervous system to help coordinate all the activities together. Take for example a person who is playing badminton. He has to run using his legs, he has to run around, and his eyes has to be on the shuttlecock, and then his hands have to move to hit the shuttlecock and send it over to the other side. Okay, so a few different activities may have to be integrated to produce the desired response. For the badminton player is to get the shuttlecock over to the other side and not drop it in any way. Now, another example is when a person feels hot, he sweats, his arterioles, meaning the small arteries, will dilate or expand. This is to let more blood flow into the skin, near the surface of the skin, so that the blood can transport more heat there, and more heat will be lost through the skin. Okay, and less thyroxine hormone is produced. So thyroxine, the more thyroxine there is, the higher the rate of respiration. The less thyroxine there is, the less or lower the rate of respiration, so that less energy is produced in order to decrease the body temperature. Okay, so all this will help to decrease the body temperature back to normal, which is the desired response. Okay, so you see here there are a few different activities that are being carried out by the body. Okay, now number 4, coordination is the work or the job of which system? Nervous system, that uses nerve impulses as the way of sending information to the brain. And the endocrine system uses hormones as their chemical messengers. So we'll talk about the endocrine system later. We'll start off with the nervous system. Now that we have discussed the important terms, let us go on to B, components of a coordinating system. Okay, that means the components needed from the time the stimulus is detected by the receptor and what happens in the nervous system until the time the effector produces a response. Let's take the example of a person who is feeling hot on a hot day, for example. So the stimulus is the heat from the environment, and this is detected by receptor. Okay, stimulus is detected by the receptors in the sensory organs. For heat, the receptor is in the skin. Okay, so the skin receptors for heat, sometimes we call this the thermoreceptors, will detect the heat, and then they will produce the impulses. The impulses will travel via the afferent neuron, which is a nerve cell. Afferent means that it brings the impulse into the integrating center, inwards, all right? So the impulse produced by the receptors are transmitted via the afferent neurons to the integrating center, which is the brain or the spinal cord. It helps to combine all the different sensory information, okay, to see things as a whole, to be aware of things as a whole. So it's either the brain or spinal cord. Normally it's the brain. So the brain will interpret all the information that's coming in, that the person is feeling hot, okay, and that there's a lot of heat around. So the brain may decide to send an impulse to certain effectors to reduce the temperature. So the brain will send an impulse via the efferent neuron. Efferent, think of the word exit. So efferent neuron brings or transmits the impulse out of the integrating center, exit. Whereas afferent neuron transmits the impulse to the integrating center. So the impulse is transmitted to the effector, effectors like muscles or glands. For example, the sweat gland. And sweat gland will then produce the response, which is to secrete sweat on the skin in order to absorb, for the sweat to absorb the body heat and evaporate. And in this way it will cool down the body. So there we have the 7 components of a coordinating system. The stimulus detected by receptors. Receptor produce the impulse sent via the afferent neuron to the integrating center, for example the brain. Brain interprets the information and sends an impulse which is transmitted by the efferent neuron to the effectors. Effector can be either muscle or gland, and then that will produce a response. Effector will carry out response. Now, as for interneurons, interneurons is the third type of nerve cell. Okay, we have afferent neuron that transmits the impulse to the integrating center. Then you have the interneurons in the integrating center itself, because brain and spinal cord are made up of a lot of interneurons, millions and millions of interneurons, which is another type of nerve cell. Okay, and the interneurons will then transmit the impulse to the efferent neuron. Right? Okay. So now we're going to look at examples of how to explain the transmission of impulse or the pathway of from the detection of the stimulus to the response, to the production of the response. Right, so now we're going to do a little exercise here. The question is, state the main components and pathways involved in detecting and responding to the changes in the environment. When we say changes to the environment, it means a stimulus, okay, a stimulus or many stimuli, okay, for changes. So actually the question is, state the main components and pathways involved in detecting and responding to stimulus or stimuli. So we have just discussed the main components just now, so let's fill it up. The first one, what cells in the sensory organs will detect the changes? Yes, it's the receptor, okay, or the receptors in the sensory organs detect now the change is called what? Stimulus. Okay, so the stimulus B will trigger a what to be produced by the receptors? Yes, nerve impulse. All right. Now, what is the structure that will transmit or carry the nerve impulse? Transmit is a better word than carry, although I think this is also acceptable. Carries, but transmit is a more accurate word. So, what is the structure that transmits the nerve impulse? From the receptors. Yes, a neuron transmits nerve impulses or the nerve impulse to where is the next stop? Integrating center in the brain. Okay, so the brain interprets the information, that's the job of the brain, and sends out another what? Yes, nerve impulse via the interneuron, the second neuron, to the third neuron. The third type of neuron is called what? Yes, efferent neuron. So all these neurons are actually just nerve cells with fibers, long fibers to transmit the nerve impulses, right? Some have shorter fibers like the interneuron. The fibers are shorter than the efferent neuron or afferent neuron. Now, what will transmit the nerve impulse? So it's actually efferent neuron will continue to transmit the nerve impulse to the next stop. What is the next stop? It's the effector, right? And that is such as the muscles or glands. So effector will then effector reacts to cause a what to the stimulus? Yes, a response. Okay. So if you have managed to get all correct, and that means you have understood what I discussed earlier. If not, please refer back to the terms that you missed out. Okay, refer back to the earlier part of the video. So this slide shows the answer for the same question that we were discussing just now. Now you can screenshot this and copy down your book because it forms the basis of the essay question that we are going to discuss. Okay. Here is a forecast HOTS essay question for SPM or for your term exams or even for other types of exams. Something similar like this may come out and we need to know how to answer this question. Okay, so I'm going to teach you the technique of answering this type of question. It's very easy. Once you learn it, you will know how to do it. So here goes. Lena hears the sound of the water boiling in the kettle. She turns off the gas stove. Explain the pathway involved in detecting and responding to the stimulus. 10 marks. Okay, so read through the question a few times. And let's analyze it. Explain the pathway involved in, first of all, detecting the stimulus and then responding to it. So you must mention what the stimulus is and what are the cells that are involved in detecting it. Okay, and then from there, what happens to the cells? What do they do? And what happens in the whole body? All right, so you have to talk about the components of the coordinating system, which you have just discussed in the previous slide. Okay, and you must read the action carefully. She hears the sound of the water boiling and turns off the gas stove. Okay, as an example, this is the response. So what are all these? The sound and so forth. Okay, so I will leave you to try this question first and you can use the format of the previous slide on the stimulus, receptors, and the integrating center, the brain and all that, to write an answer for it. So in the next video, I will show you the answer, how to write a good A+ answer to get 10 marks, and also how to remember, the technique of remembering, how to write it. And you'll learn an acronym, a very good acronym in the process. Okay, so see you in the next video. And do try this HOTS question first before you view the next video. Thank you and goodbye.